Hello, everybody. I am Jamie Farr, the superintendent of the Canandaigua City School District, and I am here with probably some information you've been waiting on for quite a while. And so let's get to it. This is really our reopening plans for the 21-22 school year. So first, I'd just like to say that the plans that you're about to see were really created in conjunction with the CDC guidance that has been out for a bit, the American Academy of Pediatrics guidance, and our NICEAD reopening guidance that just recently was released. We also work closely with the Ontario County Public Health Department. We work closely with other school leaders in Ontario County and school leaders from Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES to develop these reopening plans. Some timelines, just so you're aware. Junior varsity and varsity athletics will begin on August 23rd, and that's when these plans will begin and go in place. On Tuesday, September 7th is the first day of school for staff. And then on Thursday, September 9th is the first day for our students, except for our half-day UPK students, who will begin on Monday, September 13th. So our reopening plans, everything that I'm about to share is really subject to change, and it's based on local, state, or federal guidance and local public health information. That changes awfully rapidly, as we've learned. But ultimately, our main priority was safely have students and staff back here 5 days per week. So I'd like to just cut to the chase and say, in our plans, you're going to see that students and staff will be back here in school 5 days per week. I've also heard from a lot of parents wondering if we're going to offer a virtual option for people that just don't feel safe quite yet. And I'll repeat, it's for people who don't feel safe quite yet. Maybe they can't get the vaccine yet, and parents are reluctant to send their kids until they can get the vaccine, or their children might have autoimmune issues and things like that that they're concerned about. To be clear, districts are no longer required to offer a virtual option, but here in Canandaigua, we will for those families, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. First, let's talk about vaccinations. It's currently the leading public health prevention strategy to end the COVID-19 pandemic, according to research. We will continue to promote vaccine clinics for those who are interested. Still at this time, anyone who's under 12 years old, they're not eligible for the vaccine, but we are not requiring the vaccination for any of our students or any of our staff. It is not going to be a requirement in pretty much any school that I'm aware of across the country. Transmission levels. This is going to be important to know, and this is public information on the CDC website, and we'll reference it often. The CDC will designate different transmission levels for different counties: low, moderate, substantial, or high. This is a current map of New York State and where each county falls. And you can see Ontario County is now in the substantial range. We went back up to the substantial range approximately Friday of last week. And the projections show that within 2 weeks, all of New York State will likely be in the high range. That's something to keep a close eye on because it will determine what restrictions we're working under based on what transmission level we're at. So let's just jump right into masking. If Ontario County is designated as low or moderate transmission, according to CDC, mask wearing will be strongly encouraged but not required, and masks won't be required when outdoors. However, we would recommend if kids are passing between classes or in high congregation area, like in the lunch line, that they might want to consider wearing a mask in those instances if we're low or moderate. If we are substantial or high, however, masks will be required everywhere indoors on school grounds. Masks will not be required when outdoors. If we want to talk a little bit about music classes, when we're in the substantial or high range, performance masks will be worn and bell covers will be used on instruments if we're in the substantial or high range. Physical distancing. If we're CDC determined to be low or moderate transmission, there'll be no distancing requirements whatsoever. If we're substantial or high, we will have distancing requirements of 3 feet where practicable. And so not always will it be practicable to be at 3 feet, but where it is, we will adhere to 3 feet. And this does include music and physical education. which last year had different standards. This year, it has the same standard as any other classroom. Cafeteria and meals. It'll look a little bit differently this year. And so kids will be free to eat their lunches or their breakfast in a typical fashion in the cafeteria at tables. But what will happen is students will have assigned seats, and there'll be essentially a 6-foot radius around each child. And if there was an exposure to COVID, anybody within that 6-foot radius is subject to be quarantined. And we would work with the Department of Health to determine that. Also, the USDA has extended their free meal waiver through this coming school year. And that was something that went into effect when the pandemic first started. So everyone does qualify for free meals again this year. Transportation. Anyone on public transportation, and this is a CDC requirement across the country, anyone on public transportation must wear a mask at all times. There'll be no distancing requirements. We'll try to keep no more than 2 people at every seat, but that might not always be possible. And roof hatches and windows will be open as long as it's at least 40 degrees or warmer and there's no precipitation. And again, we will have assigned seats that will help with contact tracing. Recess and physical education, if we're in the low or moderate range, people who are not fully vaccinated are encouraged to wear a mask in crowded outdoor settings. And again, this is not information we can collect, who's vaccinated and who's not. So it's a bit of the honor system. But in the substantial or high, people who are not fully vaccinated are encouraged to, again, wear masks in crowded outdoor settings. But for indoor settings, everyone will wear a mask, and we'll try to distance as best as possible. Athletic and extracurricular activities. We believe more information will be coming on this, and that the information will be shared from Jim Simmons, our Director of Athletics. Again, as a reminder, varsity and JV sports begin on August 23rd. That's coming up really quickly. 7th and 8th grade football on August 30th. Modified sports on September 7th. And then the masking guidelines and physical distancing that I just referenced actually applies to all athletics as well. And there seems to be a concerted effort to make sure all these extracurricular activities can safely happen this year and we don't lose seasons. But if we're in a low or moderate transmission zone, anybody fully vaccinated and participating in extracurricular activities, they don't need to wear a mask at this time, so long as we're at low or moderate. If they're not fully vaccinated, those participating in sports or extracurricular activities should wear a mask and physically distance as much as possible if we're in a low or moderate transmission zone. However, if we're in substantial or high transmission zones, masks must be worn by everyone, regardless of vaccination status, while inside, as tolerated. And I'll remind you, currently we're in a substantial transmission zone here in Ontario County, and the data and the projections show that that's going to continue to be in that zone for quite some time. In fact, I'll be surprised if we're not in the substantial or high transmission zone for much of the school year, if not all of it. Mitigating measures. And so we're going to continually emphasize hand washing and respiratory etiquette, coughing into your sleeve and things like that, washing your hands before and after you eat. And we'll have hand sanitizing stations throughout the school building as well. Cleaning, our faculty and staff will be provided with cleaning supplies, and they're encouraged to clean throughout the day if they wish. But we're finding that the virus, that COVID-19 really isn't being transmitted on hard surfaces. It's an airborne piece. So it's not as necessary to clean between individual use like has been happening in the past. But our custodial staff will do high-touch surfaces throughout the day just as a precaution, and we'll do deeper cleaning each night. We'll encourage windows to be open in classrooms, at least partially, all year long. We did that last year. And we'll move our outside air filtered being into the building to the highest levels possible. We will continue to use MERV 13 filters across the districts. And we'll use fans in classrooms, but they need to be pointed out the window, pulling indoor air out. Fans should not be blowing across people because that will spread indoor air contaminants. Testing, voluntary, and I'll emphasize voluntary, surveillance testing may be implemented in substantial and high transmission zones, and that's something we'll still explore, but it would be voluntary. Contact tracing will still work with the Department of Public Health and help them with contact tracing and communicating with folks that may have been exposed. School closure, if we have to close because of staffing shortages or because of infection rates that have escalated, we will shift to remote instruction, but and that may take a day or two if we have to, but we're hopeful that won't need to happen. More mitigating measures. Last year, you may recall, we really didn't allow many visitors or volunteers, and we know how important they are to our educational experience. So this year, we will allow visitors and volunteers. We will also encourage virtual opportunities to interact and have meetings, but certainly we will allow people on campus. We'll have to take their temperature and do health screening surveys with them upon arrival, but we are going to allow that on a limited basis again this year. Also, field trips, we are cautiously allowing, but we have to be clear that we may need to cancel some of those field trips because of infections and COVID data and things along those lines. And so we have to be very careful about money deposits, contracts with travel companies, and things like that, because we want to minimize risk of financial loss for people. So occupancy limits, as you recall last year at extracurricular events, we had occupancy limits. If we're in a lower moderate transmission zone, there won't be any occupancy limits. Again, we're currently in substantial. And so in a substantial or high transmission zone, there will be some occupancy limits indoor where we'll have people 3 feet physical distance from one another. Again, remember wearing masks. And they'll either be separated by individual or by same household family by at least 3 feet. Even in substantial or high transmission zones at this time, outdoor occupancy limits are eliminated. It's much safer to be outside. More mitigating measures. Please, 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 if you're feeling sick, stay home. Call your doctor, your pediatrician, call the school nurse, or if you're an employee, call your supervisor here at school, and we can talk you through next steps and what should happen next. Certainly don't want to have any instances where people are feeling ill and coming to work and potentially exposing others to an illness. You may be asked to isolate. If you've tested positive for COVID-19, you will be asked to isolate. It's similar to last year. It's 10 days that you'll be at home, and Public Health of Ontario County will monitor your isolation. Quarantining, there's a lot of different rules now specific to quarantining, and I'm not going to read all of these slides verbatim, but I'm just going to summarize some pieces. If you're unvaccinated and you've had a potential exposure, you'll likely be quarantined. You can almost count on it. If you're vaccinated and had an exposure to COVID-19, there's a good chance you won't be quarantined and will be able to continue, and they would just recommend that you wear a mask for a certain set of time and get a COVID test just to confirm that you haven't contracted it within 3 to 5 days. And so there's a bit of information there, and certainly you can take some time and pause this video to read that, but I just wanted to mention those pieces. Of course, we have students with a variety of different abilities and needs, and so we will continue to work closely with folks to make sure we're giving IEP services, intervention needs, so forth and so on as necessary, and we'll have to work together with families through the process. So I mentioned virtual school. No, we're not required to offer virtual school, but we feel like it's important, and we will offer virtual school. It won't look exactly the same as last year. Across the district, there'll be some differences. And I'm actually going to create a separate video specific to the virtual school option for any parents that might be interested. You can watch that video, and that's going to be released the same day. And so you can watch that. And if, again, you're interested in the virtual school, there'll be a survey, and you can sign up for it. So sometimes we have outdoor organizations using our facilities, whether it's youth sports or different organizations. I just want to be clear that so long as we're lower moderate transmission levels, we'll allow outside organizations to use our facilities. If we're in substantial or high, and again, we're in substantial now, we'll either not allow it or we'll ask them to reduce their occupancy by 50%, just so there's not as much congestion by outside organizations. And so we'll work closely with anybody who's filled out building request forms to do so. but they all must follow all of the health and safety guidance that we have in place for our regular school day, even though they're an outside organization. Communication will be incredibly important again this year. We will communicate regularly when transmission rate levels change through Brave Square. We will also communicate anytime there's been a COVID-19 exposure in school that's led to quarantine or isolation. And so please download the free Brave Square app. It's where we communicate almost everything. Also of note, remember last year we did the daily health screening survey where we asked folks to take temperatures and answer screening questions. That has been determined to no longer be necessary. But what we are saying is if you are coming to work, or if you are coming and sending your child to school, I should say, that you're attesting to the fact that they don't have any symptoms of COVID-19, that they don't have any symptoms of communicable diseases, and then they haven't been exposed to COVID-19. And so you're attesting to all of those things that you did last year simply by sending them. You don't have to fill out a screener survey any longer daily. And so really, thank you. This has been a long haul. This has been a lot of work, and we fully are aware that people have strong beliefs on what we should and shouldn't do. And so I'd like to just say we've tried to create a plan that we believe is fair and equitable and safe, and looking closely at the data and being able to remain nimble and switch at any given time should new information be brought forth. But no more cherry cohort, no more gray cohort, no more 4 days, no more hybrid. We're back together in school 5 days a week. And that's ultimately what I think all of us can agree is what we want. And we are offering a virtual option for folks who just are really a bit nervous still, and maybe there's some health risk at home, and their kids aren't eligible for the vaccination yet. And so there will be another video discussing that. Please watch that and learn more about it. And then lastly, just as a reminder, this plan will go into effect August 23rd of 2021. That's when fall sports start, and we start having more people on campus. So that will include all of our extracurriculars, all of our 12-month employees. Because we're in a substantial zone, we'll be back to wearing masks on school campus starting this coming Monday. And as things change constantly, which they have been for about 18 months, we will communicate immediately with all of you. And so I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening to this. I thank you for reading through the slides and help making sure you understand. And here we go. Looking forward to a great school year and closer to normal. And I use the term normal with quotes because I think it's all relative nowadays. But we just know we have a great community, great students, and a great staff. We're going to make the very best of this school year. Thank you.